was read by William Cooper, the author of Behold a Pale Horse. Bill Cooper, a synopsis of what your book is about.
Well, Chuck, I'm really to sell a book.
No, that's okay.
I thought this was going to be an interview, but
it's a discussion.
The Behold a Pale Horse, I wrote. I actually wrote it during the 80s and brought it all together in 1990, and it was published in December of 1991 by Light Technology Publishing in Sedona, Arizona, as a warning to the American people and anybody in the world, really, who appreciates and loves liberty and freedom and understands that, like I do, that was the ultimate achievement of all humankind, and it had never happened before in the history of the world, that the common man had become free and was created. I wrote it to shock people and wake them out of their slumber and get them to asking questions and finding out what was going on. And I made quite a few predictions in the book, which have all passed. There's some that still have not come to pass yet, but will. And basically, what it's about is the efforts of a cabal of men and women who belong to the highest echelons of many different secret societal organizations. To bring about a one-world totalitarian socialist, what they call a utopian government, over the bones of all of the sovereign nation states of the world and all of the existing religions of the world.
I think that what you're saying is quite documentable. I think it's something that we've known about for some time. We know that international communism was openly attempting to do this. Utopias have been floating around, and when I hear people talk about it, I always tell them that that's fine if they want to live a utopia, but don't push their utopia on top of me.
I
think that what you're saying is quite apt.
Yeah.
How did you get into researching this?
Well, it happened quite by accident. Many years ago, I was reared in an Air Force family. And when I became 18, I went into the Air Force and was attached to the Strategic Air Command. And I'd heard rumblings and rumors and things. And then I left the Air Force and went into the Navy, which is what I had really wanted. I had a problem with chronic motion sickness. And so, but I just wasn't happy because the Navy was really a dream that I had had all during my childhood. So I went into the motion sickness be damned, and lo and behold, I didn't even get seasick, not once, the whole time I was in the Navy.
Right.
During that time, I served as a river patrol boat captain in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and was decorated and have 2 medals with V for Valor. Was attached to the Office of Naval Intelligence. Served 3 years on the intelligence briefing team for the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, and also served as the Petty Officer of the Watch, which is the senior enlisted man in charge of the command center at Fleet Headquarters. I also operated the KL-47 and handled all what's called compartmentalized top secret message traffic that came to the command center and routed it to the different places where it was to go. And
I saw some things that firsthand.
Oh, I saw some things that woke me up, to be sure, and told me that the world was an entirely different place than what I had always thought it was. And I learned there that the American people are seldom, if ever, told the truth about anything. And that literally since the Woodrow Wilson years of his presidency, where they formed the League of Nations and tried to put together a world government, it had been an avowed policy of the United States government to create world government and to dissolve all sovereignty, including the United States, and to ultimately combine the armed forces of the major powers of the world under what eventually came to be formed in 1945 as the United Nations as a utopian government. And so I had planned to spend my life in government service, but after I learned these things, I had to leave. I couldn't be a part of that. And then it was another 16 or 17 years before I came to grips with myself and realized that I couldn't keep all that locked up inside me anymore. And during that time, I was doing some pretty active and very deep research into what it all meant and collecting documentation and all of that kind of stuff, and trying to find out who was behind it all. And then one day I decided that enough was enough, and the American people needed to hear this because they don't have much time left. And I believe that was in 1988, and I've been talking ever since. My book was published, as I said, in December of 90. For the last 8 years, it has been the #1 best-selling book that's ever been published as an underground book, and has been #1 for all of those 8 years, and is still #1 today without one single word of advertising anywhere.
You know, William, I've been broadcasting for about 2 years, and in the course of that time, your name has popped up fairly often by callers who have told me to get a hold of your book.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that you send it. Now, what were some of your predictions that have already come true?
Well, I predicted the fall of the Soviet Union and that it would be a ruse, that communism is really not dead. It's just it's a ruse to disarm the West, and that's based upon mainly the testimony given to the intelligence community in secret by Anatoly Golitsyn, who was a high-ranking Soviet defector to the United States.
And who has published a book called Perestroika Deception now.
Yes.
That outlines this.
Yes, he has. But you see, I knew this way back in the early 70s,
Yeah,
1971.
amazing. I mean, extraordinary. And we have to remember that both you and he published this material before it happened.
Yes, absolutely. I also predicted the fall of the Berlin Wall. Predicted exactly 3 days before it occurred, the invasion of Panama and the
All right, so with William Cooper, Behold the Pale Horse, report from Iron Mountain, something that's so authentic.
It's absolutely authentic. They have tried their best to discredit it. Even have sent some people out to claim that they wrote it as sort of a joke or an experiment or whatever. Those are all untruths. In fact, if you have any brains at all and you read the report from Iron Mountain and look around in the world, you can see that this thing was not written by somebody as an experiment or a college paper or as a joke, because everything in there has been implemented since.
Yes, and I'm a fan of that book, and I think that I tell people that even if it were a fiction, it doesn't matter. It's true in the same way that 1984 was a fiction, but yet it was also Orwell's way of telling us what the Fabians had in mind.
Well, Orwell had to write it as a fiction, or else if he had written it as truth, he certainly would have been assassinated, and I don't think the book ever would have been printed.
Right.
So he wrote it as fiction, as sort of a thinly veiled warning to the people of the world about what was coming. And, he was a member of the intelligence community himself.
Yes.
Just as I was, and probably came across the knowledge much in the same way that I did, by accident or by being at the right place at the wrong time, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. But the report was not written as fiction, is not fiction. It is an actual that is ordered to be done, predict or possibly predict what the United States do, and the world government could do in order to maintain order amongst the population of the United States and of the world, if all of a sudden there were no enemy amongst the nations of the world. Clearly, there's got to be an enemy.
Right, and they
we'll create enemies. Even if it has to be pollution, we'll create enemies. And we'll create an external threat from space, which is exactly what this alien thing is really all about.
Point out that they'll have to either create some phony environmental, literally create an environmental problem that's real as a way of keeping people off center and using it as an excuse for total government.
Sure, and it doesn't matter if the enemy is real, is an artificial invention.
Yeah.
As the ozone hole is one of those things. The ozone hole is not a threat. The ozone is not threatened. There are no holes. There is no ozone layer at all. There is an ionosphere, which is what they're now calling an ozone, just a place where gases in the atmosphere are ionized, different spectrums of light and electromagnetic energy that strikes the atmosphere from the sun. So as long as there's oxygen in the atmosphere and there's sunlight, going to be ozone.
Right. So yeah, it's sort of cooked up.
Yeah, but it's an issue that if people believe it and it's going to be addressed as solving, it's going to be a world governing body to do it, because how can the United States Chile, for instance, what it does with its atmosphere?
You know, you point out that Wilson was the version that was openly globalist, and a lot of the foundations were established around that time, particularly the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which was one of the planners of World War I.
Yeah.
And they talked about the need for a war as a way of rearranging the social order. I think that it's these foundations that are still the culprits. They're these omnipotent, tax-free collections of money and power, and they draw up these various plans on how to change the way we see the world, how to brainwash us, basically.
Chuck, the foundations are just tools. They are not the originators of all of this.
Right.
There have been secret societies amongst humankind in all nations and all races all over the world since the beginning, when some guy figured out how to go in and nobody else knew how to do it, and he learned that he could control everybody else in his little band of cavemen simply, by knowing how to keep the fire going.
Yes.
And if he agreed to keep the fire going for him so that they could cook their meat and stay warm, then they would agree to give him the best woman or women, and they would go and hunt for him and do the work, and he would sit around and become the brain of the group.
Right. Now, not all secret societies are evil, and many of the people in these secret societies are unwitting, and I would use the main example of that.
Well, wait a minute, Chuck. I didn't mention the word evil, and all of these people in these things actually sincerely believe that they're doing the best thing for humanity.
Right.
I've learned that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't think that it's evil. I only point to evil.
No, they don't, and nobody should, really.
Well, that anyone who's trying to subvert other people and force their will on other people is engaging in something that is, less than honest, at least.
Well, less than honest, wrong, deceptive, manipulative, all of those terms certainly apply.
Now, which of these societies of the Watch, we always hear a lot about the Council on Foreign Relations. I always get the sense that they're just a front group.
All secret societies which have a pyramidal structure of levels of degrees of initiation, where there's a whole lot of people on the bottom that literally don't even know what they've joined here, and a procession of degrees that get smaller in number as far as members that belong to those degrees. As you get toward the top, at the top there is one order that makes up the depths or the highest degrees of all of the social orders and secret societies, and that group of men and women is known collectively as. And that is today. It's always been in existence. It did not start with Adam Weishaupt, and it did not end when Adam Weishaupt.
So then it's been a continuous chain all the way from Adam Weishaupt, 1776, right up to the present?
It started long before Adam Weishaupt ever came along. Adam Weishaupt was a priest who belonged to the Jesuit order.
Right.
The Jesuit order was begun when Ignatius Loyola was arrested by the Inquisition and used his political power and influence to gain an audience with the Pope in an attempt to save himself. The reason he was arrested is because he was the head of a group in Spain known as Alumbrados, which is the Spanish word for Illuminati.
So then, yeah, the Illuminati precedes. I mean, it probably could go all the way back to the most ancient of times.
You better believe traced it all the way back. It left a very clear trail. There is no doubt about it that it did with Adam Weishaupt. Not end with when Adam Weishaupt died. It was in existence long before the Egyptian dynasties and is functioning and foisting its will upon the world today.
Perhaps one of the most important about Adam Weishaupt is that through him, much of the philosophy was exposed and discovered by and brought out for us to see.
That's correct,
and that involved the subversion of nationalities, the subversion of religion, the subversion of family, and the creation of a world order with some kind of an illuminated, great, wise people who would have almost godlike powers running everything.
Well, if you understand the symbolism, that's all metaphor. Actually, they don't really believe in God at all. They believe, if they believe anything, they believe that man is God. And it's actually the origin of what we know now today as the humanist.
We know that the Great Seal of the United States is a pyramid and that has Masonic symbolism in it. How much influence were others in this movement?
Many of the founder nation were members of the secret societies. Some of them were actually members of the Illuminati. Benjamin Franklin was one of the let's just say that Benjamin Franklin pulled the wool over everybody's. Pretending to be a devout Christian, he was actually the master of the Lodge of Nine Muses in France. He was the master of the First Masonic Lodge in Philadelphia. He had two wives, neither one of which he married, and had children by both of them. And while he was serving as an ambassador to France, he surrounded himself and came from morning until he passed out late at night. And then when he came back to the United States, he pretended to be a devout Christian again. Jefferson was clearly a member of the Illuminati and defended Adam Weishaupt whenever anyone attacked him or nation. George Washington was a member of the Freemasonic Lodge and was presided over many military lodges, and actually was the man who brought most of the officers who served in the Continental Army Revolutionary War into another secret society known as the Knights of the Golden Circle. Any other things that the American people were never taught, don't know anything about, and when you try to teach them these things and show them how they can look it up and verify it, some people get extremely angry about it.
William, I'd like to see your research on it, but I would point out to you that I've not deeply read in the works of Jefferson and Washington, but when I look at their material and their public utterances and their public persona, plus I look at it itself, I see something that is hood and that has created a very free nation.
Nobody said it. Nope, Chuck. Nobody said it wasn't.
So then, well, there seems to be a contradiction here.
There is no contradiction whatsoever. Their goal in creating the United States of America was to give the common man freedom.
Well, didn't that run the goals of the Illuminati?
No, that was exactly in line with the goals of the Illuminati. The purpose of the whole thing was to give the common man freedom, which would spread throughout the world and topple the kings and queens' thrones.
Well,
the Illuminati could never make any progress, and in fact, their whole organization was always at risk as long as there were queens sitting on a throne.
Well, Bill, if that was their goal, then I think that was a laudable goal.
I didn't say it wasn't. You see what you're doing? You're contradicting the truth by assuming, attacking the purpose or the fruits of what the founding fathers gave us.
Okay.
They gave us freedom. In doing that, they fulfilled their goal of toppling the kings and queens from off their thrones around the world. Their intent in the long run was to establish democracies, which would then lead into socialism, which would then give them their ultimate goal, which was the realization of the communist state. And
well, it's a lot to kind of
that's the whole truth of the matter. Our founding fathers warned us. They told us what would happen if we allowed our human nature to get the best of us. And they knew full well, being geniuses that they were and the students of human nature that we now know that they were, that the common man would give up his freedom eventually for some sense of security and safety.
Oh, I
that's
think
exactly what's happening.
Franklin is a very famous quote from him, and I'm paraphrasing, was that he who sacrifices liberty for safety deserves neither.
That's exactly right, and he meant exactly what he said.
But I mean, it seems to me, and again, I'm a little new to this, that they were trying to help us not.
No, they weren't. No, they were. These were geniuses. These were men of the mind. They had no more respect for man who could not use his mind or understand philosophy than Napoleon or Caesar did. This country for a purpose, and that purpose was fulfilled. It had nothing to do with respect for the guy who was out there plowing his farm.
Well, this is extraordinary. I mean, I'm very, you've really gotten my interest up in terms of looking at.
That's good. For most of our lives, we were taught that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, and then when his father asked him who chopped it down, he said, "I cannot tell a lie," and he died.
All right, we'll be right back. We're with William Cooper. Stay tuned for news. Let's call in a comment 970-689-8255. We're joined by William Cooper, the author of The Old and Pale Horse. William, bringing back to a little bit more modern times and the Iron Mountain report, etc. The whole UFO issue is one that is a phony one. Is that your contention?
Absolutely, yes.
So there's no actual extraterrestrials or anything like that?
Well, I can't say that. I've never been out in the universe. I don't know if there are extraterrestrials out there anywhere in the universe. I can tell you this. What we are being shown and what is being demonstrated to us is technology that stems from some technology that was originally developed in Nazi Germany just prior to and during World War II. Most of that was captured by several different nations, and UFOs are owned and controlled and flown by the United States, most probably Great Britain, Australia, and what used to be known as the Soviet Union, what probably is now Russia.
And the purpose is simply to get us off of the trail, as it were.
The purpose is to, number one, have a secret technology which is way beyond the known capacity that the public has any conception. And what they could ultimately do with that is anybody's guess. But what it's being used for, I can tell you quite frankly, is to the people of the world that there's an external threat to the earth so that they can bring the world together under the United Nations, using them, if they need to, as the excuse and reason for doing it.
Yeah, I know
Who
recently...
speaks for planet Earth? Argentina? Is Argentina going to speak for planet Earth?
No.
How about...
recently I saw the movie A, and there's a speech in that movie where the commander says, will the Federation fight this thing, and I thought that was very much a piece of propaganda by...
Absolutely. And that's what people will remember. It also did an awful lot to take away from the traditional meaning of July the 4th as Independence Day for the United States of America, and a global outlook.
Right. But then, of course, according to you, the original founders had a globalist outlook.
They did. Absolutely.
So why even, maybe that was the real purpose.
Pardon?
That was the real purpose of the 4th of July, according to you. So,
according to me.
Or according to your research.
No, according to my research, the 4th of July began as a yearly celebration of the independence of the United States of America from Great Britain.
Anyways,
the recent movie Independence Day now begins to give it a globalist meaning.
Yes. You've done some research on the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Yes.
What was that all about? Who wrote it? It seems like a blueprint for world order of some sort.
Who understands religion and has studied religion to any extent can read the protocols of the so-called wise men of Zion, and you'll see that it wasn't written by anybody that I could ever identify as being Jewish. There is a definite and without any doubt whatsoever Catholic flavor to the writing of that, and if Jews had written it, they would have disguised identity more completely, and they certainly would not have used the word goyim so out of context so many times as it is used in that document. Whoever wrote it as a part of a real plan. In my research, I've realized that the only people who could have wrote it at that time and who are still bringing that plan into fruition today is the group known as the Illuminati, by the way, which has a lot of Catholic members, a lot of Protestant members, a lot of atheist members. Whether they belong to any of these different religions, whether it's Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, or whatever, they are in those religions to ultimately subvert those religions into what will become the ultimate world religion. And you can see this at work in the different religions today as they work toward an ecumenical rapprochement amongst themselves in order to bring themselves together as one.
I think you can, and in fact I've interviewed Bishop William Swing, who is the head of the United World Religions, and it's a religion that is set up just like the UN with a General Assembly and the whole bit.
Uh-huh.
And it's very paganistic in nature, very occultic. Certainly there's no place in there for religious Christians or Jews.
No. And this is a big mistake to make, is to pin what's happening in the world on one religion or people or one race or one organization. It doesn't work that way. That's not what's happening.
No, I think that his comments were quite revealing about this illuminated philosophy. In fact, in Masonry they call it Illuminism.
Yes,
the Communist Manifesto was also written by this same group.
Absolutely.
And that is virulently anti-religion.
Yes.
And also anti-private ownership, which I think is the bigger issue, actually.
The ultimate goal is the destruction of what we as the different major religions of the world, and the bringing back, as they call it, of the old gods of...
Right, and this kind of idea how free man is the ideal, which is man that has no conception of individuality and of private ownership.
If they call that free man, I'd like to know what a slave is.
Oh yeah, I mean obviously, and of course they exempt themselves from actually doing this.
Sure, that's pure communist rhetoric.
Yeah, and I tell people who want to advocate socialism, be socialist. There's nothing in this country that's stopping them from it. Let them move to Vermont and form a commune.
Well, they can't do that. The nature of socialism is such is that if they came out and they were honest about what they were doing, they'd be part of it. Socialism and communism only succeeds through the lie.
It only succeeds at the point of a gun.
Pardon?
It only succeeds at the point of a gun. It's enforced.
Not always. They have socialism and communism has been foisted back. They have convinced people to bring it in, and only when they had to live under it did they really understand how wrong they had been. And it's always, I'll tell you something that blows my mind. It's always the so-called intelligentsia, the college professors and the big brain thinkers who fall into the trap of socialism and communism and help bring it into power. And then the first thing that happens when it comes to power is all of these people.
Of course. That's the first thing Lenin did.
And these people who call themselves intelligentsia and think that they're so smart haven't got the brains to look at history and see that if they get their way, they're going to be the first ones eliminated.
Well, look, and you have enough honor to hate traitors. And that's exactly what they are. But I tell them, and I told Howard Zinn, who's one of the nation's preeminent socialists, that he should sell his Cape Cod cottage and disavow his royalties, be a socialist if that's what he wants to do, if he's so guilt-ridden about living in a free system. Anyways, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back. The number, 970-689-8655. We're joined by William Cooper. Bill, where the email is going nutty, apparently. We're getting people aren't calling, but they're emailing obviously this. Do you want to let people know how to get a copy of your book?
Yeah, they can, if they want a copy of the book, they can send $30. Make the check or money order payable to Harvest and send it to Harvest Trust, P2470, Pine Top, Arizona, 85935. That's Trust, P.O. Box 2470, Pine Top, 8595. We also have a website that people with computers, if they want to see what I'm doing and what I'm all about, and visit one of the largest websites on the internet, and also, might add, it's one of the visited websites. They don't need www, just http://harvest-trust.org. That's harvest-trust.org.
Okay, and you're on the air.
All right, Chuck, this is Tim from Colorado.
Yes, ma'am.
This is an interesting conversation you are having, and you need to have this guy back. He's need to hear a little bit more of his thinkings.
Well, I'm going to read the book, and I'll follow it up. I tend to do that.
Okay, right before our first president, there was a president of it that was, his last name, I believe, was Randolph, and whatever happened to that individual?
I have no idea.
Okay, that I didn't know if you'd researched back that far or not.
Well, I have, but he's significant, and so at each point that it's insignificant, I tend to go in the direction that is significant. Just to get of how subversive our founding fathers really were, they had no authority to do what they did. They were actually sent to get together by the 13 colonies in order to make the Confederation a little bit stronger so that they would bind the states a little bit better and would not fusion. None of the colonies gave them any authority whatsoever to destroy the Articles of Confederation and create a whole new government called the Constituted States of America.
Right, and did they really, you said that they were heavy into philosophy aspect. Now, they did know that man is weak in certain ways, and they were playing up on that. But
yes, but not for the reasons that most people would think, such as the original sin or the fall of man, or man is created imperfect. They believed that man was not educated properly. they believed that the mind or the intellect was supreme, and that they were deists, actually, if you will, in their overall outlook. And so they believed that God was in everything. And since the most superior creature was man, and man was the only one who could think and had an intellect, they believed that the collective consciousness of mankind was the mind of God.
Right. And now, okay, and I'll ask you a question then. Why did they succeed in our knowledge at point, or to the point where we started knowing a lot more, and now, and you look at today, they're drawing back, and I was wondering, what is the difference in between them?
Well, they wanted to. The only way that they could get rid of what they called the tyranny of kings and queens and popes and prelates was to give the common man freedom and education.
Right.
And so that's exactly what they gave the common man. The common man then just spread this throughout the world, and that's exactly what actions occurred everywhere. And kings and queens were toppled from off their thrones, just like popcorn popping on for a movie on Saturday night. And but they understood the weakness of human nature. They gave us all the tools that we make this freedom that they gave us, the actual world government, knowing that people in their weakness and in their desire to be safe and secure and not want to have any risks or put their life on the line would ultimately trade that for protection by our brother, which is, of course, the government. Always has been, always will be.
Okay,
and so in doing that, man takes a step backwards and gives back the power that he was given back to those from which it came, so that they can then institute their total control over all humanity, which is their goal.
That's an interesting thought there. I mean, when you think about what you're saying there, you just build them up to take them down.
Yeah, but I didn't invent it. They invented it a long time ago. All I did was discover it. It's clearly written in the protocols of the wise men of Zion.
Right. And
so many people read it and don't read it. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Well, you can read something and then don't see what it says, though.
Yeah.
And, well, that talk just slipped out of my head. But, anyway, thanks a lot, guys. This is very interesting.
Thank you very much. Bill, it seems to me that the entire place was very different.
I can't hear you, Chuck.
Hello?
I can't hear you. You got to press a button or something.
The flavor of the American Revolution was quite different than the French Revolution, in that the American Revolution was to restore and preserve the status quo, the private ownership. That was the main theme of it. Whereas the French Revolution was the opposite. It was to destroy the private ownership. It was to openly create some kind of a socialist world order. And that's something that's easy to look at. So I'm not sure that, I'm not sure if I understand the connection between the two.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you.
I'm sorry about that. Maybe we're having some technical problems. Can you hear me now?
A little better.
All right. My point was that the American Revolution was one which was to preserve private ownership, or was to preserve the freedom that was slipping away, whereas the French Revolution was the opposite. It was to create disorder and revolution. So I'm having trouble understanding the connection between this. But we'll be right back. We're going to take a brief break. I hope we can resolve this technical issue. And we're back. We're joined by William Cooper, Behold the Pale Horse. Can you hear me now, Bill?
Yes.
All right. I guess we're having a little technical problem. Maybe the Illuminati is doing something to our radio signal.
I doubt it.
Okay. I'll enjoy looking at your book. I mean, this is something that's certainly worth pursuing, and I hope to do a series with you. And I think that we need to understand presently what we're looking at, the dangers that we're looking at, and the secret societies that are involved in those, very specifically, including names. And you say that you make predictions in your book, some of which have not yet come true. What are those?
Most of them most of the predictions that I made have come true. For instance, I already gave you 3.
Right.
I also predicted that the first terrorist attack in the United States would take place in New York City. It did in the bombing of the World Trade Center. I predicted that terrorist attacks would continue. that there would be shootings of innocent people by individuals in shopping centers and restaurants and schoolyards and so on and so forth. That has all happened. I predicted that the word patriot would become a dirty word, and when the New World Order comes to pass, patriotism and nationalism will become a psychotic illness, and anybody suffering from that illness will be placed in mental institutions, and a lot of other things. But I want to get back to what you asked me before the break.
Sure.
And also tell you that it's okay to talk about today, but unless the American people understand the history, what brought it about, and who's behind it, it doesn't do any good to know names or anything about today, because nobody will understand it. Everybody's looking for an enemy, and they have to understand who the enemy is and why the enemy is doing what he's doing. But you made some interesting statements right before the break that that are part of the myth of America. In the 13 original colonies, nobody excuse me, nobody owned property. They were colonies belonging to Great Britain.
Right. The mercantilist.
Under the English system, the king owns all the land.
Yeah.
You could live on it by consent of the king, or the king can grant you land or make you a duke or a baron or whatever and give you property to take care of. Oh, I've got a real dry throat tonight.
But the original colonists, the whole concept of private property was the clarion call of their revolution. It was probably one of the driving forces behind it, at least based on the writings of the people who were alive back then.
Well, of course the colonists believe in private property. So did most Englishmen. But that did not negate the rights of the king to the land, which
right.
was what I was particularly talking about. In the colonies, the people owned their own property. That was not the point of contention. Neither was a little tax on tea. That's another myth. The real reason that the revolution was fought was because the Bank of England took the right of the colonies to make their own money and control it out of their hands, and made them operate a debt-based economy like we have today.
Exactly. In fact, Franklin pointed this out.
And that was the real reason, or the stated reason, for the American Revolution.
But is not the debt economy, the central bank, part of the conspiracy? I mean, Marx, one of the planks of the manifesto is central banking.
Sure. You take central banking power away from the conspirators, and they have no power whatsoever.
Right. But and yet this country has always struggled against the central bank, the English bank, as it were.
Don't bet on it. If that were true, we wouldn't have one today.
Well, we have one because we've lost. But
we have
Jackson
one because that was exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, Jackson fought it. Lincoln fought it. But William Cooper, I want to thank you for joining me. I'll be in touch with you. I'd like to do more of this.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. Good night. All right, I'll be back tomorrow night with Kevin Abrams, the author of The Pink Swastika, and also Vaughn Stetzer. My name is Chuck Morse, and I shall return tomorrow night. Good night, everybody.